Hi, I'm Heather Scurti from Slutsky Elder Law, and my guest speaker today is Scott Ferguson from Care Planning Strategies. Scott, can you tell me a little bit about why you got started with helping VAs?
Well, Heather, I'll make a short story out of a long one. But in the beginning, I had applied for benefits for myself when I first got out of the military in 1991 after the first Gulf War. And I went down to the county office. He told me, fill out a paper, send it in, and see what happens. So I did that. And a short 6 months later, I got my denial letter. And I figured, well, the VA obviously knows that I wasn't qualified for these benefits. I was listening to some friends, and they told me I could get some benefits. And even the service officers and other people that I would dealt with at the VA said, yeah, you should be able to get those benefits. But I filled it out and the VA said no, so I figured they must know more than the other people that I was talking to. Well, some time went by and I was helping another gentleman with his benefits and, working with a veteran service officer, and we got it taken care of and approved for that fella. And as I talked to the veteran service officer, turned out we were about the same age. We were in the military around the same time. And here, we started chatting like GIs do. And it turns out he was stationed only a mile away from me in Saudi Arabia at Riyadh Air Base. And now we are back in, the other side of the world. And I was in Minnesota, of all places, when I ran into him. And he said, you should have applied for your benefits. I said, I did. He said, that's great. But I told him I was denied. And he just came unglued. Why? You shouldn't have been, and this, that, and the other thing. So he looked into it a little bit further. He pulled my file up and he said, well, you only filled out this one form. I said, well, I went down to the county office and I did what the guy told me to do. He said, well, but you didn't include this. And I have a statement for you, and we're going to include that. And I'm going to pull something out of your file, and I'm going to put that in there. So the light bulb went off that he actually built the right package the right way. So we put that in, and then a short 6 months later, I got my award letter that my benefits were activated. The unfortunate part about that is it was 15 years after I originally applied, so I missed out on 15 years worth of benefits simply because I didn't know how much I didn't know. So as I say, that really put a burr under my saddle to help other people do those things, and especially our seniors. They don't have 15 years to wait or go back and forth with the VA and argue, because that's part of what they do is they'll delay and deny. And if someone dies in the meantime, they don't have to pay the benefit. So it really motivated me to get going and help other people and create the Veterans Benefits Assistance Program to get out there and work with families to educate them on the benefits that are available to help people pay for their care.
Well, it really goes to show how much having somebody that's experienced can really make a difference in applying for VA benefits. So Scott, can you tell me what is the difference between eligibility and qualifications?
It's funny, I get that question because you see it listed in different ways. And your basic eligibility for the aid and attendance benefit, for instance, and that's a very popular benefit, or it's becoming more popular, although it's very little known, because it's available to help pay for care. It's money that comes from the VA directly into a bank account for someone to pay for care, or a fiduciary account if that person can't handle their own funds. And the basic qualifications is that the veteran needs to have wartime dates of service. And notice I didn't say be a combat veteran, that's different. But a wartime veteran means that they served one day during a period of war. They have 90 days of active duty service outside of their training, which a lot of people don't realize that that's a qualification also. 90 days of service other than their initial training, like basic training and advanced individual training where they learn their job skill. They need to be over 65 or 100% disabled. And they need the aid and attendance of another person on a regular basis, and that would be 2 ADLs. Activities of daily living that they require assistance with. And that would be an expectation that that assistance would be ongoing and recurring for that assistance. Now, the qualifications part of it is a little bit different. Eligibility are some of those things that just, it can't be changed, right? We can't change the dates of service. We can't change their age if they're over 65 or if they're disabled. Qualifications gets into a different point. Those are the variables. Those are the things like making sure the income limitation is met. It's called IVAP, income for VA purposes. And what that means is they take someone's income and they calculate it down using unreimbursed medical expenses. So those numbers need to fall in line for qualifications, and we need to calculate that out so income calculates to zero. Also, there is an asset limitation. Now, just because someone is over the asset limitation doesn't mean they shouldn't look into this and find out other benefits that are available from the VA in the meantime, and other things that should be done for their basic planning needs, you know, making sure power of attorney is in place, that wills and living wills are in place, and things like that. So we always try to offer very broad consultative service and use other resources to help people accomplish their goal of a good care planning strategy, hence the name of our business. So, but those qualifications for the asset is currently in 2020, $129,094. And that will likely go up at the end of the year with the cost of living increase, the same amount that Social Security goes up. So your basic difference between eligibility are the things that can't be changed, and qualifications are the variables of what are your particular circumstances based on your income, unreimbursed medical expenses, and assets.
Thank you. Is aid and attendance available to a spouse or only to a widow?
It's funny, that's a relatively common question, because as long as the veteran is alive, it is the veteran's benefit. So this is the aid and attendance benefit that we're talking about again. Now, if the veteran is alive, it is the veteran's benefit. If the veteran needs assistance, then that veteran has a spouse that's a dependent. So a single veteran could get as much as $1,911 a month. A married veteran or a veteran with a dependent, which could also be an adult disabled child, could get as much as $2,266 a month. So the spouse does not have a benefit available to them until the veteran passes. And the reason there's a difference there is because if the veteran is healthy, I've had families come to me and say, well, we don't need a benefit for dad because he's healthy and he's the veteran, but we do need a benefit for mom because she's sick and she needs the aid and attendance of another person. That actually puts dad into a different qualification and puts him into the improved pension program, because mom's unreimbursed medical expenses will calculate their collective income down to zero, and therefore the veteran becomes impoverished, and we could potentially go, if we meet all the other eligibility and qualifications, potentially go for that improved pension benefit, where the aid and attendance benefit is an add-on to the improved pension benefit, just like the homebound benefit is. Now, once that veteran passes, that surviving spouse, which is most commonly the widow, and not to be biased on it, but typically it's the husband that was the veteran, and the wife would be the surviving spouse or the widow. And it is so common within the VA that 80% of the aid and attendance applications that go into the VA are widows of veterans, and it's commonly known as the widow's benefit even within the VA.
And what are some of the things that you can pay for with the aid and attendance?
Anything really that has to do with the aid and or comfort of the person receiving that benefit or their spouse or adult disabled child. What you can't do is you just can't take the money and give it away. There is what's called an eligibility verification report that the VA could do as often as every year. Typically doesn't happen quite that often. They say about 1/3 of the claims get edited each year, so people could expect to see that verification report every 3 years. I've had people that have gone longer than that, and I've had people that have gotten reports or needed to file eligibility verification reports every year. So they can spend it on anything. Most oftentimes, people will be spending it on their care, and that's why there's a common misconception that it needs to be spent on care or it's some type of reimbursement program, and it's not. Once you meet the qualifications, most people will remain qualified unless their income suddenly goes up, or maybe they get an inheritance or something unexpected, a gift from a family member, or it could be that they sell their home and their assets go up because the equity in a home is no longer counted towards the assets. Once the home is sold, though, and the proceeds from that sale become liquid assets and put into liquid accounts, then that could potentially knock someone out of the asset qualification. But the money coming from the VA can be spent on care. If someone's living at home, you can pay the kid down the street to cut the grass. You can pay the neighbor to shovel the driveway. You can do repairs on the home. You can buy groceries. You can pay your electric bill, whatever the case may be. It's not a requirement that it be used to pay for care. The VA looks at it that if you're already spending all of your money and you meet that IVAP calculation, and your income is calculated down to zero and you have no money left over at the end of the month because you were paying for care and assistance, they want to make sure you have that dollar amount to use for other living expenses. And if you choose to use it to pay for care, you can do that also.
Thank you. That is very helpful information. I get asked that question quite often. Scott, what benefits are available to widows?
The benefits to widows are somewhat limited. As we all know, the VA is set up to care for him who have borne the battle, as Abraham Lincoln had said, but it's also to care for the widow and the orphan. The healthcare benefits that veterans get aren't necessarily there for widows. Many people do confuse retirement benefits from a military member with VA benefits. Now, when someone retires from the military and they have a retirement pay coming in and they have TRICARE, those come from the Department of Defense. They do not come from the Department of VA or Veterans Affairs. Veterans Affairs comes from the U.S. Treasury, and just like Social Security does, and that is different. Now, widows, the aid and attendance benefit is available that I was just mentioning, and then also they have what's called DIC, or death and indemnity compensation. What that means is if a veteran's life was cut short due to injury or illness caused by their military service, and it is documented that that is part of the reason that they deceased, and they have a claim already submitted with the VA, then that widow could potentially get death and indemnity compensation. As an example of that, I got a little bit of firsthand information with being able to access information that people don't normally get from the VA. And in January of 2017, I was notified through my emails and announcements that there was a benefit available to Marines and those that were stationed in Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1987. There was contaminated water there, and my father was a Marine in Camp Lejeune in 1954. Now, years ago, when he had kidney cancer, we had no idea that it could possibly be related to his military service. But in around 2015, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Now, this announcement came out in January of 2017, and it had Parkinson's on the list. This is one of the 8 neurological diseases and cancers that is caused by contaminated water in Camp Lejeune. Again, over 700,000 Marines, family members, and support people were affected by this contaminated water. Now, being in the business that I am, and knowing about government benefits like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and veterans benefits, and doing that type of planning, I immediately helped him get that claim into the VA, open that up. He was approved in a very short period of time because the paperwork was done right the first time. He did get his benefit. Unfortunately, he did not live to take advantage of that benefit very long. He died in June of that year. But if there is a silver lining behind that black cloud, it's that my mom now gets death and indemnity compensation because my dad prematurely deceased because of his illness or injury that was caused by his military service. And she now gets $1,340 a month for the rest of her life, because not only was his life cut short, his income was cut short.
Mm. Wow. What if the spouse divorces the vet?
Very common question that I get. If a spouse divorces the veteran, the best way to think of it and remember it is that you divorce the vet, you divorce the benefit. Even though there is a rule that says before November of 1990, blah, 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 there can be an exception. The VA is somewhat known for not always following their own rules. Even when you explain it to them, to a processor, or submit it with the evidence that here's what the rules say, I don't know of anyone that's ever gotten that approved or awarded. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I would say don't hold your breath. We haven't seen a lot of success with getting that. So generally the rule of thumb is if you divorce the veteran, you divorce the veteran. I'm sorry, you divorce the benefit also.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is that if you can prove there is abuse by some type of documentation, like a police report or something in the divorce decree, that the divorce was caused because it was an abusive relationship, then there can be an exception made for that. I have colleagues around the country that have gotten that approved, but I haven't seen it firsthand.
Okay. What is the difference between income limitation and maximum benefit?
You know, that's very confusing, because if you look on the VA website, it will say that there is an income limitation. For a widow, it's $1,228 a month. A single veteran is $1,911, and a married veteran is $2,266. The reason that's confusing is because people don't know the nuances behind that. And as I mentioned a little while ago, the unreimbursed medical expenses can be used to calculate income down to a net income of zero. And people don't realize that's what they're talking about, is the net income. They'll look on there and say, oh, well, mom has a $1,300 a month Social Security check. That's more than $1,228. So I'm just not going to bother applying for the benefit, without knowing the nuances in the background that $1,228 can be calculated down to zero, and that's part of the equation to get the full benefit.
Okay, and there's always a little bit of wiggle room probably when you're working with an expert.
There's definitely an advantage to working with an expert. As you know, working with Rob in the legal field, people probably say all the time as they're leaving the meeting, oh boy, I don't know if we could afford that. The question really is, can you afford not to? Because a delay or a denial creates more work on the back end and less of a chance of an approval, or more work to get that approval. And I hear it all the time from other professional colleagues that I work with. People most times just don't know how much they don't know. When you sit with someone like Rob and have him explain things out, what are the processes of Medicaid? Or they'll look at the black and white rules and say, well, okay, mom and dad have to split their assets in half and spend down, and then we can get Medicaid. But Rob's going to say, but there's another strategy we can put into place, and we can save more than 80 or 90% of that for that well spouse in a Medicaid situation. It's the same thing with the VA. People that help people get benefits, I use the scenario of a CPA and the IRS. Your CPA or your tax preparer does not work for the IRS, but they know how the IRS works, and they work for you to get the best benefit. And that pays for itself in volumes. You save more money on your taxes when you have a CPA that helps you do your taxes. You save more money when it comes to Medicaid when you hire Rob or Slutsky Elder Law to do that. When you work with other professionals to help get benefits from the VA, it just goes so much more smoothly, and you don't get caught in the system having to go back and forth with questions from the VA, like, why are your required minimum distributions from your IRA different this year than they were last year? Well, they're different because the account was closed last year, but you have to show supporting documentation of that to avoid that question before they even ask it. So there's so many things hidden in the background that the average person is not going to know. And a good application packet to the VA is probably about 50 pages, sometimes more.
Wow, that is very comprehensive. So, Scott, I often wonder, why doesn't the application for aid in attendance say anything about aid in attendance anywhere in the application?
It's funny, one of the forms that goes along with that, it does say aid in attendance, and that's the doctor's form that the doctor would fill out and say, this person needs the aid in attendance of another person on a regular basis to be protected from the hazards incidental to their daily environment, that they need help with 2 ADLs to on a regular basis and an ongoing basis, and things like that. But on the application itself and other supporting documentation, it doesn't refer to the benefit as aid in attendance. They use other terms in there, like special monthly compensation, additional pension. There's check boxes on the same form for a variety of different benefits. And people don't know sometimes, and they'll make the mistake of checking all of those boxes off just to be sure. And they'll say, well, I'm not sure which one I should check, so I'm going to check all 4 or 5 of these boxes. And then it's going and being processed in 3 or 4 different departments, or getting answers to those 4 or 5 different things. And letters are coming that says, you are not available for, or you were denied your DIC because the veteran did not have an illness or injury related to military service. But they don't know the difference between DIC and aid in attendance, so they think their aid in attendance is being denied, but they actually got a letter that denies DIC. Various things like that. That's one of the reasons it doesn't refer to it, but in VA lingo, they have several names for the same benefits sometimes. And it's very confusing, obviously, for someone that doesn't know that, because they'll look at a form and say, well, I was told this was the application, but there's no mention of aid in attendance on that application. And then maybe they think they don't need it, or they have the wrong one.
I can see where especially our senior population would very easily get that confused, because it is very confusing.
It is very confusing. Yes, it is.
How has the VA changed their processes for approval?
You know, back in 2018, they made some changes to the processes. They did some things that clarified what were really considered gray areas. They made a bright line in the sand as to what are the asset limitations. So that's the $129,094 I referred to earlier. It's subject to change annually if it goes up with the cost of living allowance. They did change some of the rules as far as what's called a look-back period. If you're familiar with Medicaid at all, Medicaid has a 5-year look-back period. Obviously, if you're not familiar with Medicaid and those processes, contact you or Rob at Slutsky Elder Law. And but the VA implemented a very similar thing called a 3-year look-back period, and it has to do with transfers of assets. Prior to 18 October 2018, an applicant was allowed to actually transfer assets out of their name today and apply for benefits tomorrow. So that's one of the things that they stopped. Also, things like using a trust, using financial products to create income out of assets, and things like that were put to a halt as well. So some of the changes were for the good. Some of the changes, I think, were just put into place to prevent people from getting benefits that would otherwise be able to get. Just my opinion, though.
Oh. And can you tell me how the VA changed for the rules with approving aid in attendance has made a difference now?
So some of the things that have changed recently, and not to be political about it, but the current administration has really done a great job of improving things for VA. There was a bumpy road in the beginning. It took some restructuring. It was a little bit tumultuous there for a while, but I can tell you in the past year and even in the past months, having nothing to do with Corona, but things that have been in the works for the past 3 years of getting the VA turned around and better services for veterans and better processing times, it's been a noticeable difference. It's been a huge, huge difference, in my opinion. I get 100% of my health care through the VA. I've noticed wonderful differences in those areas. Also, benefits, the things that are available, not having to go to a VA hospital or an outpatient clinic. We can use civilian clinics now. It's called the Choice Program that was put in place. So instead of having to wait for my clinic hours, I can go to a Med Express if I have a sinus infection over the weekend, let's say. Things like that have been great changes. Processing times for approval of applications have gone from months down to days or weeks. And not just the 90 days that they were shooting for a few years ago, which always seemed like it was always out of grasp for some reason. Many applications are getting done. We saw one that got done in 3 days. Absolutely
Wow.
unheard of previously. Many of them, I would say most of them, are getting done in a matter of a few weeks rather than a few months or a year or more. So there's definitely been great strides and improvements, thanks to the current administration within the VA.
Thank you. Well, that's fantastic to hear. And I do hear from people often that you can have 5 different people call the same number at the VA office about the same question, and they're going to get 5 different responses. Can you offer insight about why that happens, Scott?
Unfortunately, and not to take anything away from the people that are answering the phones and doing a great job that we need, but the VA gets thousands of calls a day. They have hundreds of people that answer those phones, and they can't be trained on everything. It's not possible to have that. You can't have the experts answering the phones. The experts need to be in the back processing the applications. The people that are answering the phones, they're doing the best they can, but they work off of cheat sheets. You might say aid and attendance benefits, and they know very little about that, but they can look down a form or a sheet and say, oh, aid and attendance, and I'll go down here and I'll look here and, oh, okay, here's the form that you need, and say, fill that out and send it in and see what happens. If you went to your CPA at tax time and he just said, okay, well, let's see, we want to do your taxes. So, okay, here you go. Here's the form. You fill it out and send it in and see what happens. Would you use that CPA? Is that good service? No, you'd probably just leave the form laying on their desk and slam the door on your way out and never talk to them again. Unfortunately, that's really the service that the VA provides, and they can't have everybody as highly trained as they should be, and you get different answers. I've heard some absolutely incredulous things coming from people that are supposed to be good representatives of the VA, and you're going to them as the person that's supposed to know. And, again, not taking anything away from them, but they just don't have the training or the expertise that going to someone as if you were going to someone that does it all the time.
Sure. And you're not going to be able to get the personalized attention that you would with perhaps your office or seeing another VA benefit guru or expert.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, Scott, can you tell us any more tips or any advice that you'd like to offer to anybody that's applying for VA benefits?
Sure. I would say probably one of the biggest things I tell people on a regular basis is, don't listen to the murmurs you hear from someone that maybe applied before, or I've even had people say, well, my uncle was in the military and he says I can't get the benefit, or mom can't get the benefit, or dad, or whatever the case may be. I usually ask them, well, what does your uncle do for a living? And they'll say, well, he's a plumber. Say, that's great. Call him when your pipes are leaking because that's what he knows about. I can almost guarantee, really, that's a person that really does not know a lot about VA benefits. They might know a lot about this or that, or maybe they get their health care, but when it comes to applying for things, vets are not taught what their benefits are. When you get discharged from the military, you get your paperwork signed off and they send you home. There's, they'll give you a packet with some forms in it, and there's 127 pages of stuff that probably nobody ever reads, or if they read through it, they can't understand it anyway. Or maybe like I did, I was told I could have benefits, but I didn't know how to go about it. And they apply and they get denied and they give up. When had it been done right the first time, in my circumstance, I would have had benefits for 15 years longer. So I encourage people to, one, don't always listen to the first person that you talk to, unless maybe that's me or an attorney or someone that actually knows what's going on and gets that benefit done right the first time. Don't listen to the naysayers. Don't wait until you're out of money. Now, there are benefits within the VA where you do have to be out of money. The one that we talked about with the aid and attendance benefit today, you don't have to be out of money. You should always look into that sooner than later. Sometimes people will call, again, wanting an evaluation on government benefits. Just because someone calls and says, I want to get VA benefits, doesn't mean that's the way we're going to go. Sometimes it's more beneficial for someone to go for their Medicaid benefits, the waiver program at home. Aid and attendance is counted as income and could potentially disqualify them from that benefit. Now, if they're eligible for it, they are obligated to apply for that. But I often find that if they're in that home care situation, they don't have enough unreimbursed medical expenses to meet the qualifications anyway, so they end up going through the paperwork and the hardship and the hassle of applying, and they get denied anyway. So in the big picture, I would probably say my best advice to people is be careful who you listen to. If you get an answer that you don't like about VA benefits, call again, call somebody else, even if it's the VA, and ask again, because like you said, Heather, you could ask 5 people and get 5 different answers. Seek out the advice of a professional. Oftentimes professionals outside the VA know more about what happens within the VA, and again, be careful about information that you get from the naysayers, and don't give up. That's the biggest thing. Don't give up. I know the VA is very difficult to deal with sometimes. Seek professional advice and don't give up.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Scott Ferguson, for joining us today from Care Planning Strategies. And how can somebody reach out to your office?
The best way is email. I will say email introductions to family members that need assistance are really the best way. That way my office can immediately reply with, here's the dates that Scott has open on his schedule. Let's get you on for a first phone call as quickly as possible. Here's the questions that we're going to ask during that to help evaluate those circumstances and see if Medicaid is appropriate, if VA is appropriate. Do we need to make changes to the Medicare elections? Sometimes younger family members and the adult children ask about Social Security. All of those things we cover, and then good planning advice and techniques, power of attorney is in place and updated recently, all of those types of things. So that email address is contact@vbap.org, and VBAP stands for Veterans Benefits Assistance Program.org. That's our website, vbap.org. So to reach out, it is contact@vbap.org. And our toll-free number that is available for someone to answer 24 hours a day through our answering service is 888-245-5834. I will say you will get the quickest response through email, because their answering service will take your basic information and then email it over. And I say that because we spend so much time on the phone, especially with the new format of coronavirus. We are on the phone, we are on Zoom calls with families constantly. So that's why we have to have the answering service. So please don't get discouraged if you get the answering service. Just know they're going to take your information. We're still going to get back to you as quickly as we can. But the best way is to email at contact@vvap.org. There's also a form you could submit on our website at that same phone number. Yes, at the same website.
Thank you, Scott. And the reason why I invited Scott on to interview him is because we get asked a lot of VA questions, and at Slutsky Elder Law, we refer to care planning strategies because we know that they do a great job with the families, and we know that we can trust the services that they're going to provide. Thank you so much, Scott, for joining us today.
Great. Thank you, Heather. Thank Rob for me also. And thanks to Slutsky Elder Law for hosting today's Q&A session. And look forward to working with you again soon.
My pleasure.